Chapter 7. Medical Advertising. Now I come to a class of advertising of which I no longer approve. 30 years ago, medicine advertising offered the ad writer his greatest opportunity. It formed the supreme test of his skill. Medicines were worthless merchandise until a demand was created. They could not well be inventoried on the druggist's shelves at even 1 cent a bottle. Everything depended on the advertising. The test of an ad writer in medicine advertising was as severe as in mail-order advertising today. He was shown up quickly by the item of profit and loss. Either he sold the goods at a profit or he did not. Salesmen, dealers, or clerks could not help him. One may sell flour, oatmeal, or soap by loading a dealer up or by offering inducements. Many things may contribute in selling a staple. It is sometimes hard to measure just what advertising does. Not so in a medicine. Advertising must do all. Because of that fact, the greatest advertising men of my day were schooled in the medicine field. All of them have graduated, but all of them realized that medical advertising placed men on their mettle. It weeded out the incompetents and gave scope and prestige to those who survived, as few other lines have done. The only lines today which so try men in the fire are some forms of mail-order advertising. Medicines in those days dominated the advertising field. The best magazines accepted them. Almost nobody questioned their legitimacy, no more than they questioned railroad rebates or passes to employees in my packing house experience. We must remember, in reviewing medicine advertising, how experience and education changes ideas and principles. Every evil of the past had its logical defense. The medicine makers included many high-minded men. They felt that they were serving humanity by offering good remedies for common conditions at very modest cost. They were aiding those who could not afford physicians. There was much reason in their arguments. Every medicine maker received thousands of testimonials, and I still believe that those medicine makers did far more good than harm, even though the good came largely through mental impressions. But medical science advanced. Doctors themselves turned largely away from drugs. We came to realize that ailing people should have a diagnosis. The real trouble should be located instead of quelling symptoms. In a large percentage of cases, it was unwise to advise self-medication. I came to that conclusion many years ago. I have not advertised a medicine for simple ailments for 17 years or over. I would not do so under any circumstances. Just as I write this, I am refusing an appropriation of $900,000 to advertise a medicine. I stand as strongly as anyone today against advertising anything which opposes public good as we see it now. So please remember that what I recite here occurred many years ago. It accorded with existing principles and practices. I have never known higher-minded men than those who engaged in these enterprises. I am dealing with advertising as it applies to all conditions and all times. What should be advertised for the common good forms an entirely different question. While with Swift & Company, I wrote an article on patent medicine advertising. It reached the attention of Dr. Shoup in Racine, Wisconsin. He was selling medicines through agents. He had no drugstore trade. The agency business was dying, so he was seeking a way to place his line on the drugstore shelves. He wrote to me to come and see him. I was discouraged with food products advertised under packing house restrictions. I knew that medicine offered the greatest opportunity to an advertising man. So I went to Racine, talked with Dr. Shoup, and finally accepted what he offered. I found a line of medicines sold through agents only. Not a bottle was in drugstores. The ordinary agent could not survive, so the business was dying fast. My duty was to create a demand which would bring the sales to drugstores. Not one man in a million could have met that test without the experience in retail sellings which I had attained. Night after night, Dr. Shoup and I discussed the situation. I told him all I had done by talking ideas not connected with the product. Then we evolved the idea of a druggist's sign guarantee. People were not buying medicine, they were buying results. Many an advertiser 1,000 miles away offered to guarantee results, but the guarantors were strangers. I conceived the idea of having a neighborhood druggist to whom people paid their money sign the guarantee. First, I tried this plan out on a cough cure. It brought enormous results. Here was one cough cure which anyone could buy without risk. If it brought the results we promised, it was worth many times its cost. If it failed, it was free. No cough cure on the market then could compete with that. Later I tested the same plan on other remedies. On Dr. Shoup's restorative. On his rheumatic cure. It worked like magic. Others made claims, but we offered a certainty, and we secured most of the trade. Our guarantees were based on a purchase of 6 bottles for $5. Few users purchased that amount, but the guarantee gave them confidence in every 1 bottle purchase. Nobody in our field had any chance to compete with us. We were very cautious in those days. We did not venture into newspaper advertising. We distributed books from house to house in cities of over 1,500 population. We secured mailing lists of heads of families in every village or hamlet below that. Those were the days before rural delivery. I had complete mailing lists of all heads of families in some 86,000 post offices of the United States and Canada. The methods we used then have little interest now. Conditions have changed. We have learned that newspapers offer the cheapest distribution of any offer we wish to make. But for years, we mailed and distributed some 400,000 books per day. Later we graduated from that and got into newspapers. We secured results at 1/3 our former cost. We came to spend $400,000 per year in newspaper advertising, and the results at that time made me the leader in proprietary advertising. What I wish to emphasize here is that my proposals were always altruistic. I was always offering service. Anyone could try what I offered without risk. It either brought results beyond what I promised or the cost was nil. There was nothing in the field in those days to match any offer like that. In advertising and merchandising, that is something always to consider. One must outbid all others in some way. He must offer advantages in qualities, service, or terms, or he must create a seeming advantage by citing facts which others fail to cite. Crying a name or brand is not sufficient. Urging people to buy from you instead of others goes against the grain. One must know his competition, know what others offer, know what people want. Until one feels sure that the advantages are strongly on his side, it is folly to risk a battle. One cannot long fool people who are carefully spending money. Never pay the price to get them unless you see clearly how you can keep them. Don't underestimate the intelligence and the information of people who count their pennies. I spent 6½ years in Racine. Office hours began at 7 o'clock in the morning. We knew that extra hours gave us an extra advantage, and we were competing in one of the hardest fields that advertising ever knew. But my day never ended at the office. I had a typewriter in my home. I considered medicine as but one item, though a supreme test of advertising skill. So I devoted the rest of my waking hours to outside enterprises. The J.L. Stack Advertising Agency handled the Dr. Shoup advertising. I arranged with them to write all of their advertising. Racine was a manufacturing center, so I set out to develop, after office hours, advertising enterprises there, and from each I learned a great deal. One of the clients of J.L. Stack was Montgomery Ward and Company. I wrote and directed their advertising. Many new merchandising plans were inaugurated. My everlasting argument was against dealing with people in the mass. For instance, a woman wrote in about a sewing machine. She had that and nothing else on her mind. The general plan then was to send a catalog treating all inquiries alike. I urged that every inquirer should be treated like a prospect who came to a store. We had a special catalog on sewing machines showing every style and price. We sent every inquirer the names of all in her vicinity who had bought our sewing machines. We asked her to see the machines and to talk with their owners. There I learned another valuable principle in advertising. In a wide-reaching campaign, we are too apt to regard people in the mass. We try to broadcast our seed in the hope that some part will take root. That is too wasteful to ever bring a profit. We must get down to individuals. We must treat people in advertising as we treat them in person. Center on their desires. Consider the person who stands before you with certain expressed desires. However big your business, get down to the units, for those units are all that make size. Schlitz beer was another advertising campaign which I handled for JL Stack. Schlitz was then in 5th place. All brewers at that time were crying pure. They put the word pure in large letters. They took double pages to put it in larger letters. The claim made about as much impression on people as water makes on a duck. I went to a brewing school to learn the science of brewing, but that helped me not at all. Then I went through the brewery. I saw plate glass rooms where beer was dripping over pipes, and I asked the reason for them. They told me those rooms were filled with filtered air, so the beer could be cooled in purity. I saw great filters filled with white wood pulp. They explained how that filtered the beer. They showed how they cleaned every pump and pipe twice daily to avoid contaminations. How every bottle was cleaned 4 times by machinery. They showed me artesian wells where they went 4,000 feet deep for pure water, though their brewery was on Lake Michigan. They showed me the vats where beer was aged for 6 months before it went out to the user. They took me to their laboratory and showed me their original mother yeast cell. It had been developed by 1,200 experiments to bring out the utmost in flavor. All of the yeast used in making Schlitz beer was developed from that original cell. I came back to the office amazed. I said, "Why don't you tell people these things? Why do you merely try to cry louder than others that your beer is pure? Why don't you tell the reasons?" "Why," they said, "the processes we use are just the same as others use. No one can make good beer without them." "But," I replied, "others have never told this story. It amazes everyone who goes through your brewery. It will startle everyone in print." So I pictured in print those plate glass rooms and every other factor in purity. I told a story common to all good brewers, but a story which had never been told. I gave purity a meaning. Schlitz jumped from 5th place to neck and neck with 1st place in a very few months. That campaign remains to this day one of my greatest accomplishments. But it also gave me the basis for many another campaign. Again and again I have told simple facts common to all makers in the line, too common to be told. But they have given the article first allied with them an exclusive and lasting prestige. That situation occurs in many, many lines. The maker is too close to his product. He sees in his methods only the ordinary. He does not realize that the world at large might marvel at those methods, and that facts which seem commonplace to him might give him vast distinction. That is a situation which occurs in most advertising problems. The article is not unique. It embodies no great advantages. Perhaps countless people can make similar products, but tell the pains you take to excel. Tell factors and features which others deem too commonplace to claim. Your product will come to typify those excellencies. If others claim them afterward, it will only serve to advertise you. There are few advertised products which cannot be imitated. Few who dominate a field have any exclusive advantage. They were simply the first to tell certain convincing facts. Mr. Cyrus W. Curtis of the Curtis Publishing Company told me an interesting incident connected with that Schlitz campaign. He had never drunk beer, had never admitted the word beer or wine to the columns of the Ladies' Home Journal. But he took into the diner on a train a copy of Life containing one of these Schlitz ads. The ad so impressed him that he ordered a bottle of Schlitz. He wanted to taste a product made under such purity ideals. Among my friends in Racine was Jim Rowan. He was a clerk on small salary. He was in love with a school teacher whom his salary did not permit him to marry. But he had an idea about incubators, and he felt that exploitation of that idea would give him money enough to marry. I told him that I would exploit the idea, and I did. I read something like 75 incubator catalogs and ads. They were much alike. All the makers were fawning salesmen trying to urge a preference. I analyzed the situation and tried to find a unique method of attack. I found a practical chicken raiser, and I asked permission to write a book in his name. He was an independent fellow who cared nothing for mere opinions. So I characterized him in my book. Writing in this man's name and on facts which he gave me, I asked nobody to buy Racine incubators. I simply told his experience. He had tried all sorts of incubators, and he knew their fallacious claims. He had settled down to practical money-making, and these were the methods he used. He would help and encourage those who wished to follow him, but he had no sympathy for those who followed every will-o'-the-wisp. That plea proved a winner. Most seekers after incubators wrote for 5 or 6 catalogs. They all read alike except mine. Here was a rugged and practical man who cared more for serving than selling, and the practical people who were seeking for profit naturally followed him. But Racine incubators were high-priced. A great many converts paused when they compared the lower prices offered. So I urged Mr. Rowan to start another company called the Bell City Incubator Company, and there to offer incubators at much lower prices on other inducements. We followed up inquiries on the Racine line for 10 days. Then, when we saw too great a resistance, we offered the Bell City line. Thus, we secured a double chance on incubator buyers. Otherwise, with our best efforts, we could never have earned a profit. As it was, we built a business which today is quite extensive, and I know of no rival of the old times who survived. We organized and advertised numerous other lines in Racine. One was the Racine bath cabinet. One was Racine refrigerators. Those were excellent advertising experiences because there were no uncertainties, no repeats. The Racine Shoe Company manufactured excellent shoes. They were in the center of the leather region between Chicago and Milwaukee. Their shoes at that time sold at an average of $2.15 per pair at wholesale. I organized what I called the Racine Club. It sold Racine shoes to club members only at advantageous prices. I quoted to club members $3 per pair delivered, and I offered the choice of 6 styles. The shoes cost me an average of $2.15 per pair. The average express rate was 35 cents per pair. So my clear average profit was 50 cents per pair. But a membership cost 25 cents, and no one could buy without having a membership. The cost of my advertising was paid by my membership fees. Then with each pair of shoes I sent 12 memberships with catalogs, etc. Anyone who sold those 12 memberships could obtain his shoes at 25 cents per pair. A membership entitled the bearer to buy a pair of shoes at $3 with 12 more certificates worth 25 cents each. I was offering shoes at $3, which would cost $3.50 to $5 at the stores. But I offered them to a limited clientele. None but club members could buy them. Every buyer, if he chose, could sell the membership certificates at 25 cents each. If he did so, his shoes would cost him only 25 cents. When my advertising secured a few buyers, they became salesmen for me. So a little advertising created for me an overwhelming trade. It soon exceeded the capacity of the Racine Shoe Company, and orders were much delayed. The fly in this ointment was the fact that shoes did not always fit, and I guaranteed a fit. The returns absorbed most of my profits. But I learned a new angle in selling. I learned how customers, whether in direct selling or otherwise, could influence future returns. All that time, I was continuing to advertise retail sales the country over. I experimented locally with every sort of sale. Whenever I found a plan which brought large returns, I told other dealers about it. This was all night work. I never thought of sleep. My whole ambition was to find ways to lead people to buy, and I found them in plenty. What I found then has been the foundation of all the success I have gained.